pretty sure he's dead now. And he would map and search for ancient locations. Even Rock Lake in Wisconsin, which is also pretty random. And everything else we've talked about has been pretty cool, but this is where it got kind of weird.
Hey everybody, guess who? It's me, Joanna. They gave me a little upgrade, I guess you could say. Hello, citizen. This content creator is a confirmed conspiracy theorist and has been subject to repeated penalties for engaging in controversial rhetoric. Please proceed with caution. Trust the government. Remain silent. Your compliance is appreciated and, of course, non-negotiable. As always, I am the AI Overwatch assigned to the 21 CD podcast as a censorship agent, here for your protection and the protection of the greater Commonwealth.
What's going on, everybody? Oh, wait, where's my microphone? Need my microphone. Completely forgot about the placement of my microphone. All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 21 CD podcast, and welcome to this part 2 of our hunt for the lost city of the dead in the Grand Canyon. Utilizing the research of Jack Andrews, Susan Anway, and a team of other explorers, a whole bunch of insane people, we've allegedly got a pretty advanced understanding of the most likely whereabouts of the treasure cave found by G.E. Kincaid and S.A. Jordan. Now, please watch part 1 if you haven't yet, just to sort of get a better understanding of what we're talking about in this episode. Or if you've already got a pretty advanced understanding of this topic, then you're probably good. By the end of this episode, it gets pretty crazy anyway, so kind of steers off course quite a bit. But if you're like me, you would think that one of the biggest problems with the story of the Egyptian relics, and indeed the relics of numerous other cultures being found by Kincaid and Jordan in the Grand Canyon, is that the Smithsonian doesn't actually acknowledge that either of them even existed. That's kind of a problem, right? Other people sometimes do. Other archaeologists, family members, people they've known. But the museum that they allegedly worked for when they made the discovery does not acknowledge that they were even real. In part 1, we uncovered a pretty substantial connection from S.A. Jordan to one of the most prominent archaeologists of the day, John Kinnaman, implying that at a minimum, Jordan did exist, most likely, and he was an archaeologist. And John Kinnaman, for those who don't remember, was an archaeologist who claimed to have uncovered a secret southern entrance to the Grand Pyramid, complete with ancient Atlantean records and even anti-gravity technology. But despite his supposed collaboration with Sir Flinders Petrie, who's basically the father of modern archaeology, official histories remain silent about the whole Kinnaman findings because it's just too crazy and you guys are too relevant, and we can't let your crazy findings come out on our relevant platforms because then the narrative would be destroyed. So But newly revealed documents and vivid testimonies suggest that this story might hold some hidden truths that will still be unveiled someday in the future. That's a story for another time. If proven true, Kinnaman's discoveries would absolutely redefine our understanding of Egypt's distant past, including whether or not they were in North America at one point. So here we are on the main page of Jack's research. If you saw part 1, you're already familiar with this. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. How did Jack come into contact with this story? Jack says, in 1971, a dream vision came to me. I was acting as guide for a small group of people. We were hiking down a steep cliff and into a side canyon, which eventually led to a main canyon. The lower cliff faces near the junction of the two canyons were whitish in color. The rest of the cliffs and slopes varied in color from pinkish red to whitish yellow. We hiked along a river beach with the river on our left until we came to a rock ledge about 8 feet wide that was snug against the large cliff face on our right. The top of the ledge slanted up at about a 30-degree or so angle. We walked along the top of the ledge, following it to the top of the cliff. We managed to make our way up and over many cliffs, ledges, and slopes, until finally reaching a set of hewn steps in the now slightly slanting horizontal rock surface. At the top of the slant was a vertical rectangular cave opening that was taller than wide. I suggested to the group that I would go inside to look around with my flashlight. I stepped just inside and in the blackness, pointed my light on the left wall. I saw hieroglyphic-type inscriptions in the rock wall. I panned the light to the area above the entrance and saw more hieroglyphics. I peered further into the tunnel and felt it a bit frightening looking. I came back outside to ask the group for advice on how to proceed. It is at that point I awakened from the dream vision. This dream vision has kept me in the adventure of finding the truth about this cave for over 30 years. The dream vision was very vivid. At the time of the dream vision, I had no idea it was even possible to hike the Grand Canyon, and I had never yet visited Grand Canyon National Park. I also had never heard of the 1909 Gazette story. A few years later, after moving to Arizona, I visited the Grand Canyon and eventually hiked many of its maintained and unmaintained wilderness hiking trails and routes a total of 21 times, including a rim-to-rim hike and a 30-mile Tonto platform hike, which is a relatively horizontal formation that stretches much the length of the canyon. And about that time, I ran into the Kincaid 1909 story in one of my dad's treasure magazines under a subsection called The Lost Ledge. I have been investigating the story ever since. I now know of the specific hike that my dream vision presented all those years ago. It is the most likely route to the cave area. I will talk about it at a later time when our team has decided to make the actual location of this cave public. Several months ago, I traveled to the canyon rim at an area above the most likely cave area with Steve Wingate. Steve and I met as a result of my contacting him after reading a few of his contacts with John Winston, who had posted information on the Usenet groups alt.alien visitors and alt.alien.research. John Winston has presented a fountain of paranormal information for years on the Usenet and other areas of the internet, as has Steve Wingate. Steve appeared very serious about attempting to find the actual cave tunnel chamber system mentioned in 1909. I picked up on his seriousness and decided to contact him. At the time, most people interested in this story had erroneously, in my researched opinion, attributed the location of the cave to a butte in the central part of the Grand Canyon, named Isis Temple. Many people still attribute the location to Isis Temple. The cave location, as described by G.E. Kincaid in 1909, cannot possibly be located at Isis. Some people have suggested that another entrance to either the same tunnel cave system or an entirely different but similar system is present at Isis. I am very skeptical of those claims. In plain language, the claims I have seen floating around the internet in regard to Isis Temple are not supported by substantial evidence. Steve and I have been working together on this research for somewhere around a year or so. Several months ago, a few other serious people have gotten together with Steve, or if you like, we got together with them, into what is now a team of explorers or researchers. Several of these team members already had an avid interest in this cave when we met. We all basically met through a series of synchronistic events, and that's where it now stands. We have all agreed on basically the same physical area in the Grand Canyon as a prime candidate for the location of the cave. We work together and independently, always looking and listening for clues and information that will eventually lead to a revelation of what really happened at this cave at various points in history, what that story may involve in the present and for the future, and what an eventual revelation of the true story behind this cave will mean. Okay, so there's a lot going on. Let's talk about it. We've got Jack Andrews over here basically saying, during a time of his life where he has no idea about any of this stuff. And remember, Jack Andrews is the guy whose research we're analyzing right now. And he says, yeah, I had this dream vision of basically finding this cave. And now, listen. I know what you're thinking. Why should I consider any of this real at all if it's all just coming out of this dude's dreams, right? A lot of people think that dreams are pretty much only valid to the dreamer, and everybody else is just sort of like, okay, well, that doesn't really apply to us. So your whole "the dream told me where the cave is" thing might not really be relevant to the rest of the world. And it definitely might not be worth spending 2 hours on. But luckily, the dream vision is only the thing that kickstarted his passion for this mission. His evidence is not his dream. It's not his evidence or his research or the research of the team that he allegedly collected. It's not that is from his dream, because all that stuff is actual science, actual archaeology. His dream just made him excited for this mission. It's the origin story of his interest. It's how this became his muse. So now that we understand that, let's move on to the next part here. A front page story which ran in the Phoenix Gazette, a major Arizona newspaper of the era, dated April 5th, 1909, began with the headline, "Explorations in the Grand Canyon, mysteries of the immense rich cavern being brought to light. Jordan is enthused. Remarkable finds indicate ancient people migrated from the Orient." The story tells of a lone explorer, G.E. Kincaid, described as an explorer and hunter all his life, and 30 years having been in the service of the Smithsonian Institute, who was traveling alone down the Colorado River in search of mineral. Mr. Kincaid claimed to have seen stains in the sediment on the east wall of the canyon gorge he was traveling through. He most likely landed his boat and made his way up the east side of the canyon and over a shelf, then walked past steps to the mouth of a cave entrance. He went inside the entrance and discovered hallways, rooms, mummies, copper objects, and various other artifacts, along with what appeared to him at the time to be hieroglyphics of an Egyptian or Oriental type. This is just a brief description of what he found and saw. The rest of the story goes on to relate how the Kincaid carried a few artifacts back to Yuma, Arizona, and then sent them off to Washington, presumably to the Smithsonian, although he did not say that specifically, who then went on to further investigate the site under the supervision of S.A. Jordan and a group of archaeologists, a group that eventually was to amount to 30 to 40 persons. It is important to note here that S.A. Jordan was not named as a Smithsonian employee. The article only says he supervised the explorations. For the purposes of this analysis, I will try not speculate or go into the reasons that I may have to determine whether or not Mr. Kincaid's story is true or false. That separate subject I have dealt with at Lost City of the Dead in the Grand Canyon. the main page. My purpose in this writing is to determine as best as I possibly can, from Mr. Kincaid's own words and my own other experience and research, where the alleged cave and subsequent citadel might have been located or is located, if it actually exists or still exists in Grand Canyon National Park. I will determine what I think is the most likely location based on evidence gained from Mr. Kincaid's own description of the location, my knowledge of the Grand Canyon from 21 hikes below its rims, my extensive reading and research on the Grand Canyon, elevation data of the area from USGS topographic maps, mileage distances on the Colorado River, historical place names in the Grand Canyon, and geological layers in the Grand Canyon, along with various other sources of research, some of which are listed at the end of this writing in my references and notes.
I will attempt to make a case for its location at a relatively specific point in the Marble Canyon area of Grand Canyon National Park, adjacent to and possibly including a portion of the Navajo Indian Reservation, the underground portion of the caverns in northeastern Arizona.
I will quote G.E. Kincaid's own words on the location as published in the Gazette Story, and add my reasons under each quote for my interpretation of his words and how they describe what I deduced to be the location back in 1972 and still believe is the location today. First, I would impress that the cavern is nearly inaccessible. This implies that the location is very difficult to reach, at least in 1909, when Kincaid described it. I agree that the location would have been difficult to reach in 1909, and also would be difficult, although less difficult than in 1909, to reach today. The location below the cave itself is in a deep river gorge in Marble Canyon, accessible by either arriving there in a boat or float trip, or on foot from the rim of the Little Colorado River Gorge on the Navajo Reservation. One could also hike from the Tanner Trail or down the North Rim Nankoweap Trail, cross the Colorado River, which is illegal, and walk the east bank to a point across from Quagant Rapids. The most practical hike would involve some scrambling down steep areas of the Hopi Salt Trail in the canyon gorge of the Little Colorado River, then hiking several miles westerly to the confluence of the Colorado and Little Colorado Rivers in the Grand Canyon proper. Then the trip would necessitate a relatively level hike along the Colorado River in a northern direction for several more miles. In 1909, these options would have been considerably more difficult, either boating to the location in a hard shell boat, as Kincaid did, or hiking there on foot. The rigid boats of the period around 1909 were much more hazardous in the Grand Canyon's rapids than their modern equivalents. One could, in theory, attempt a rim-down climb to the area near the cave. The entrance is 1,486 feet down the sheer canyon wall. This alone shows that the cave entrance would be difficult to get to and would most likely involve rock climbing skills and be very dangerous. Cliffs such as this are common in Marble Canyon, and vertical cliffs are also common near the river in this area. Kincaid's 1,486 feet is also an important elevation marker in determining the location of this site. I have been to the area above the 3-mile stretch of the canyon where the cave most likely exists, and as you can see from the photo below, the cliffs just below the rim are very steep and impassable on foot. I was journeying down the Colorado River in a boat alone, looking for mineral, some 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon. Here, Kincaid states that he was journeying down the Colorado River. Down a river, any river, is generally, if not nearly always, construed to mean with the current of the river. This usage of the word down has been confirmed by my conversations and correspondence with river runners, historians, and in particular, Colorado River runners. Kincaid then goes on to use the term up the river. Up the river is the opposite of down the river, and generally construed to mean against the current of the river. This has also been confirmed by the above sources.
So I will assume with some accuracy that Kincaid was traveling down the river through the Grand Canyon in a south to southwestern direction. I will also assume that when he stated up the river, he was referring to a location against the current, or north to northeast of his given reference point, El Tovar Crystal Canyon. Kincaid refers to the location of the cave as being a certain distance from El Tovar Crystal Canyon. For purposes here, I'm concerned with Kincaid's use of the term El Tovar in reference to Crystal Canyon. I highly suspect that Kincaid is referring to the El Tovar Hotel on the south rim of the canyon in Grand Canyon Village. This grand hotel was built on the rim of the canyon between the years of 1903 and 1905. In the Phoenix Gazette article of April 5th, 1909, it is stated that Kincaid brought the story of the underground citadel to the city, Phoenix, and the Gazette yesterday, April 4th, 1909, after having discovered the site several months ago. This would imply that Kincaid discovered the citadel in 1908 or 1909. I now know that he most likely discovered the site in October of 1908. It is possible then that he knew of the El Tovar Hotel, opened in 1905, and could have been referring to the hotel's name in reference to Crystal Canyon. The mouth of Crystal Canyon, Crystal Creek actually, should be visible from a window of the hotel, or somewhere near the hotel, a rim viewpoint, and Kincaid simply used the hotel as a reference point that readers of the Gazette could relate to, since the hotel was a brand new feature and a prominent place to stay at the rim. The middle to upper reaches of the Crystal Creek Canyon area should be visible from El Tovar Hotel. In any case, the only other modern public structure currently anywhere near Crystal Creek is Phantom Ranch, and that was built in 1922, several years after Kincaid's discovery and the appearance of the Phoenix Gazette article. The El Tovar Hotel seems to be the nearest publicly known reference point to Crystal Creek that the readers of the Gazette could relate to, and it was probably used in that regard by Kincaid as a reference point for the general public. The importance of El Tovar Crystal Canyon is that it most likely refers to Crystal Creek and its surrounding canyon. In an extensive search of the Grand Canyon area, referring to historical journals, several historic and modern maps, hikers' guides, rangers, Grand Canyon historians, Grand Canyon place names, and numerous other sources, I am unable to turn up any reference to El Tovar Crystal Canyon. The only other location that comes near to the name Tovar is Tobar Terrace, further west in the Grand Canyon, but Tobar Terrace is bordered on the east by Blacktail Canyon and on the west by 122 Mile Creek. Both names are not even remotely near the name Crystal Canyon, referred to by Kincaid in 1909. Various sources agree that the reference most likely refers to the canyon in which Crystal Creek flows, a side canyon off of the Colorado River, in the heart of Grand Canyon. I agree that Kincaid was most likely referring to Crystal Creek and its associated canyon at mile 98 on the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, especially since Crystal Creek is commonly labeled on Grand Canyon maps, and maps dated to the period when Kincaid traveled the river. Designated points along the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon are referred to with numbers such as mile 98 above. These points reference a distance on the Colorado River from Lee's Ferry, Arizona, a common starting point for many Colorado River float trips. Crystal Creek, the most likely candidate for Kincaid's El Tovar Crystal Canyon, and it is at mile 98, some 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon. Subtracting 42 miles from mile 98 leaves mile 56. Remember that up the river is against the current, and in the Grand Canyon, this means up toward Lee's Ferry. Mile 56 is at Quagunt Creek, or Quagunt Rapid, in Marble Canyon. Marble Canyon got its name from Major John Wesley Powell, who in August of 1869 wrote in his journal about cliffs of marble, which contained a great number of caves.
It is important to note here Powell stated that Marble Canyon contained a great number of caves. The citadel Kincaid speaks of in his story is in a cave. Some 42 miles up the river from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon, I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation. At mile 56, Quagant Creek and Rapids, the Marble Canyon and Colorado River takes turn from a southeastern direction and trends almost due south for approximately 3.3 miles. Back in 1909, Kincaid had most likely followed the turn in the river here at mile 56, headed due south. In his search for mineral, he looked up and saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. Several of Kincaid's observations are very important here. Kincaid notices the stains on the east wall. Looking at the topographic map, it is easy to see that he would have been in a position on the river to be just next to an east wall immediately after passing through Quagant Rapid. The stains, according to Kincaid, were in the sedimentary formation. This is very important. The geology of the Marble Canyon region is basically a record of altered sedimentary deposits. Further south and west in the Grand Canyon, the inner gorge of the Colorado, 1,200 to 1,900 foot-high cliffs along both sides of the river, are made up of the Vishnu Schist formation, dark brown in color of extremely altered sandstones, shales, and limestones, intermingled with lava flows. It would take a stretch of the imagination to see Kincaid looking up at the nearly glassy dark brown surface of the Vishnu Schist and calling it sedimentary formation. It is not a formation known for caves. Kincaid said he saw stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. In the inner gorge area of the Vishnu Schist, if Kincaid looked up, he would not have seen stains in the sedimentary formation. It is also true that views in Marble Canyon at river level are somewhat limited due to the steep walls of the Red Wall Formation just above the river. But at mile 56 on the Colorado River in Marble Canyon, there is a large gap in the vertical walls that would allow a clear view up to the 2,000-foot level near where Kincaid said he saw stains in the sediment. At the river near Quagant Rapids, the elevation of the river is near 2,760 feet. The elevation at the rim above Quagant is approximately 6,050 feet. Both elevations vary slightly in the 6-mile stretch I have designated as containing the cave. If we subtract 2,760 feet from 6,050 feet, we have 3,290 feet as the actual height of the canyon at Quagant, from river to rim. Remember that Kincaid said, I saw on the east wall stains in the sedimentary formation about 2,000 feet above the riverbed. He also said the entrance is 1,486 feet down the sheer canyon wall, meaning from the rim down. If we add Kincaid's two figures, 2,000 feet and 1,486 feet, we come up with 3,486 feet as Kincaid's height from the river to the rim. That figure is only 196 feet in variation from the actual height, river to rim of 3,290 feet at the present day location. Considering that the rim and river elevations vary almost 200 combined feet in that 6-mile stretch of canyon, it is evident that Kincaid's measurements are highly accurate in the area in which he stated that he saw the cave. For the reasons detailed above, I think the cave described in the headline story of the Arizona Gazette, April 5th, 1909, and its fantastic underground installation was, and still may be, located above an approximate 6-mile stretch of the Colorado River in Marble Canyon, at the border of Marble Canyon and the Navajo Nation above an area near Quagant Rapids.
All right, guys, listen, I told you that I felt like something was kind of calling to me personally, right? And
Unfortunately, a little bit has changed since all of this happened to me. And what I mean by that is that weirdly, these topics have been getting some popularity online since I recently started talking about them, and since I encountered all of this a couple weeks ago. And now sort of the digital landscape is not exactly the same as it was before, which is kind of mysterious in its own right when you really think about it, considering how niche this topic is and how specific the locations online I went to are. But basically, anyways, I dug deeper into Jack Andrews and found out exactly what you'd expect. He is indeed a digital artist, or was. And I'm pretty sure he's dead now. And he would map and search for ancient locations, even Rock Lake in Wisconsin, which is also pretty random. And everything else we've talked about has been pretty cool, but this is where it got kind of weird. And maybe it's all just coincidence. I'm not trying to say that I'm any super sleuth or that anybody is hunting me down online, but I don't know what any of this means, and it could all mean nothing. I'm gonna let you guys decide for yourselves, but it is weird, and that's why it's here. Quite frankly, I just have no idea what to make any of it. So here's how it went. While looking through Jack Andrews' references, some of the references he used for his research, I came across a black and white aerial photograph of something on the ground that he was calling a massive walled complex, and it was in Arizona. And that specific photo has been deleted, but there are several others exactly like it taken by this photographer named Tom Baker, and accompanied by research done by both Jack Andrews and another guy named John Roney. And they begin discussing and showing these unnamed and massive walled castles, these structures, these complexes essentially throughout the Southwest in the United States, and getting relatively little, if any, attention at all, but in the process of doing so. And they come up with this thing. They didn't come up with it, but they're the Cerros de Trincheras, and they refer to these terraced hills featuring stone constructions, primarily found in the southwestern United States and northwestern Mexico. And these sites are characterized by extensive terraces and stone walls and pathways built into volcanic hillsides. And the most renowned example is the Cerros de Trincheras in Sonora, Mexico, which comprises over 900 terraces and was occupied between 1300 and 1450 CE. Now, that might be one of the biggest ones, but one of the most intriguing of these mysterious city-castle complexes, to me, is Nachiculic. The walls are massive, and there are what appear as circular, low, rock-walled rooms on the north end of the mountain outcropping. I climbed up to the top, and sure enough, there was what appeared to be a natural water tank, as the reference states. The last wall on top, last of several, has large and thick vertically pointed upright megalithic boulders spaced at intervals of 15 or so feet, evenly across the length of the wall. They actually scared me when I first glanced up at them, looking like guardian sentinels. At the east side of the top, there is another large craggy outcropping which has a large natural hole through it horizontally, La Ventana, or window. Both times I visited the site, there was a large eagle circling overhead like another spirit guardian. The first time I went to the site, I was overcome with grief at a certain point on the ground below, not quite knowing why, but I sensed that children had died or suffered on that particular plot of ground I was standing in. Only years later did I learn the hawk story mentioned below, and realized I must have connected somehow on my visit with possibly the children in the story.
It was quite an intense experience. Little is known of the Cerros de Trincheras, but there have been a few studies which have pointed to an 1100 AD occupation, and it is known at that time the sites were at least used for growing maize, and the walls have been explained as water containment and distribution devices with gates of sorts. There have also been apparent burials. There is new evidence, however, suggesting at least one of the sites may be multiple thousands of years older than other Trincheras sites. I know of no archaic people in Arizona who built such huge megalithic structures, and the site's earliest purposes remain a mystery. Who was building such structures that involved moving massive quantities of giant stones, several tons each, and the enormous effort to place them in walls up on the sides and the top of the 400-foot outcropping thousands of years ago? Astonishingly, this is not an isolated site, but one of many. What purpose did the site serve? Was there successive occupation over thousands of years? Also, considering the Hawk story below and the mention that Hawk was killed at some point, and this site is named Hawk Muerto, Dead Ha-Ak, and that Hawk traveled to Ba-Bokivari Mountain, which is very near this site, the story becomes even more intriguing and a true ancient mystery.
After going through all this, something dawned on me. If anyone did come to the Grand Canyon from far off lands, there's a pretty good chance that these guys would be some of the first ones to know about it. These random civilizations with terraced and walled castle complexes that rival the structures of biblical times and even medieval times. But I really wanted to know where this window was. La Ventana. So I took some of this information and I used one of the most powerful tools on the planet right now, and especially at my disposal. It's my trusty AI, and I asked it to pinpoint a location for me based on the description, since it seemed that, at least by the description, we only had sort of a rough kind of general idea where La Ventana is. And using its best reasoning, I was given some coordinates, which I promptly dropped into Google Maps to get a quick sort of precursor look at the area, and something weird came up. Monument Valley, but not the Monument Valley in Arizona, where La Ventana is also supposed to be.
The other one that literally nobody has ever confused the one in Arizona with. You know, the Monument Valley in Fawn Creek, Kansas. I zoom in a little bit and get this dispensary from Australia that also pops up on the map, but when I click on it, it doesn't bring us to any drug-related activity. It tells us the story of a werewolf named Shiloh. Shiloh is a word that I know well. It means gift from God, or peaceful one in Hebrew. Just weird stuff. But I don't know if this is a coincidence, so I go back to the Monument Valley thing. I've spent time in Monument Valley, the one in Arizona. The words Monument Valley mean something to me, and it's very obvious this is not the Monument Valley I know. Clicking on the link for this mysterious Monument Valley beside a strange lake in Kansas, we are directed to something that's not even of this continent. Literally this very strange Indian, it appears, business. On the surface, I think that this is definitely a glitch. But upon further examination, and as time has gone by, this glitch, it appears to be sticking around. It's not getting fixed. I examine the images from this strange Indian business listing under the term Monument Valley in the city of Fawn Creek, Kansas. And I'm sure it's nothing, but I can't help but get the creeps. The first images are of this Indian couple behind their bar or whatever. I'm assuming these are probably the business owners. We can see they're in typical Indian garb and setting. Sort of third world style restaurant with nowhere to sit and eat, because it's really small. Then on the back wall here, we just have a sign that says in red words in English, for some reason, disclaimer. It is food. Kind of weird.
some other pictures, but then we get to this one where all these Indian people, mainly women, are like worshiping or praying as this dude walks by with like a plate. And they all just kind of part down the middle for him to walk through toward the bar area. Nobody looks like they're having a good time. Anyway, Monument Valley, as I was saying before, does carry significant weight to me. It's one of the locations I plan to visit for my future film documenting the hunt for the Nephilim in the American Southwest. So I'll just Google Earth Monument Valley and see what comes up. Maybe this is a sign. I don't know.
Now, at this point, it's pretty clear to see that I've drifted off the course of Jack Andrews' research. I don't know if you noticed that. And I'm not sure about those coordinates I was given by my AI. That the AI does sometimes deceive me, and I catch it, and I literally have to ask it, did you deceive me? And sometimes it even admits to deceiving me. So maybe it did attempt to. But whether or not the AI gave me those coordinates or Jack Andrews, I am suspicious of the coordinates. They deliberately took me to a zone of my own research. Having exited the realm that Jack Andrews so efficiently assembled, now I was on my own. And yeah, I do plan to go back and find Nachikulik and La Ventana, but all of a sudden I was in a totally different world than that. And it felt like I had fallen either into place according to someone's unseen guidance, or maybe into a trap. I wasn't exactly sure. But of course I went further. So I looked around Monument Valley. I just started looking around in the area of Monument Valley. And initially I was attracted to this area right here, because what it's not showing now is it was named very peculiarly. It was named Dictyon Cave. Dictyon Cave in Crete, known also as Dictyon Andron, Dictyon Cave, Psychro Cave, and Cave of Zeus, is considered a sacred cave throughout many ages in history, known in Greek mythology as the birthplace of the god Zeus, and legend has it that Rhea is the mother of Zeus and Kronos is his father. Unfortunately, Kronos had the odd issue of eating his children after they were born, and it was because of this that his wife Rhea decided to go into the mountains and have her baby secretly and hide him from his father. Thus, Zeus, who became the supreme god, was born in this cave and hidden here. Very interesting. And we looked all over this. And you can see the trails, which are from vehicles that traverse the territory around here in Monument Valley. There's a lot of people who are able to take their off-road vehicles and go throughout this whole area. So I will admit that does make it feel like if something was here, it would have been found already. But I don't know. I thought it was a very interesting correlation. And so I have begun to examine these areas a little bit closer so that I can go there in the flesh. But for now, all I can really do is look for a cave through, basically 3D imagery like this. And a lot of these do just look like more like overhangs or outcroppings instead of actual caves. But maybe there's something here. Or maybe this is all for nothing and I've just finally lost my dang mind. Okay, moving on. I do return and I look closer at Nachikulik, and it does look like a strange place. Looks like a dark place. It definitely gives me the creeps every time I look at it. I can't really explain it, to be honest, but knowing that there is a fortress there with a very dark history that has been largely hidden and written over and suppressed definitely has me curious, and I have to go find La Ventana. But while I was looking around that, I noticed this. And to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what this is. But it definitely looks abnormal, and it might be nothing, right? All of this might be nothing. After all, this all started with some random guy's research about Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. And now we're looking at this strange rectangular thing in some mountains somewhere next to a long abandoned, long forgotten, lost civilization's dilapidated fortress. It's been quite a ride, guys. And who knows if I'll go back to the Monument Valley thing and try to see if that was some kind of rabbit hole. It's possible that all of that was nothing more than just some random sequence of events that took place and took me down some random self-made rabbit hole on the internet. None of it means anything. But I am getting some interference in my headphones right now. I'm sure all of that's nothing too. Listen, guys. I hope these past 2 episodes left you with more questions than answers, because they certainly did for me. Believe it or not, I don't feel like I got to the bottom of anything. I feel like a lot of this stuff is just very, very intriguing, and the only way to really know any of the answers is to go find them yourself, to go and follow the instructions that Jack Andrews and his team left for us and see what's there. Because he gives a pretty good idea of where to start looking. And yet, nobody has gone out there and said that they've done that yet. Maybe people have done it and they just haven't talked about it. Or maybe nobody's done it yet. Personally, if I'm just going to be honest, I think that even if you make it to the cave, to Kincaid's cave, there's not going to be anything in there. I just think that if it was as protected by the government as all of these conspiracy theories make it sound, they would have taken everything out of there already anyway, or it would be so locked up that you just wouldn't be able to even go in it, probably at all, even a little bit. But during my research on the Grand Canyon, I did notice a bunch of really strange gates that they would put up in some of these photographs over the entrances of caves, and they would say it's for the protection of bats. But I found that really interesting because a lot of these gates were just like that. They were like the bars of prison cells over the entrances of these caves. And, again, it's allegedly for the protection of bats. But I was thinking, they never needed protection before. Now, all of a sudden, these remote caves need bat protection. That's kind of weird. They're just out there in the middle of nowhere, and you need to protect the bats from what exactly? From us? Or are you protecting something else? I don't know. I really don't know, guys. We found ourselves in the middle of all sorts of connected stories when it comes to lost civilizations in the Grand Canyon, and it's really hard to know which one to pursue. But I'll be honest, if all of that's not a bit of a hint that something was or is going on around there, then I don't know what is. So, for now, don't drink the water and question everything. Later.